Hello friends, today I'm making another anime doll. I've wanted to make a doll based on sexy jutsu for ages. I was a huge Naruto fan back in the day, and I always wished I'd had the confidence to cosplay sexy jutsu, but a doll will probably hit the same beats anyway. So before we get started, if you enjoy this video, please give me a like, and if you want to see more from me, consider subscribing and hitting that bell, because I have no posting schedule. I super appreciate it. It really helps me out in the algorithm. Thank you so much in advance. Draculaura makes such a good base for an anime doll, and her skin tone is going to be a good base for airbrushing later. As usual, I shave her head. I warm the vinyl of her head with a hairdryer, and then I carefully pull her head off. I use a screwdriver to loosen the plugs inside the head, and then I use needle nose pliers to remove the hair and the glue. Look, I know that people tend to say that this is one of the best parts of doll customizing, but I actually absolutely hate it. I have some sensory issues with sticky things and hair, so the combination is just not it for me. So I'm using a glove and just battling with this horrible sticky glue. To take the face off, I'm using acetone on a piece of cotton wool. I'm just trying to see if that stain will come off around her hairline. It won't, and as I suspected, it's staining from the glue that's been in her head. I find it helpful to squish the doll's head around to get that paint off. The staining from the glue isn't a huge issue for this project because I'm going to be giving her an airbrush colour change, and I'm going to be showing you some tips for blushing with an airbrush. A tip with your sticky gross tools is use that acetone cotton bud to take the glue and the goo off of your tools once you're done. This is hair from Visco's Heaven. I'm going to be using Honey today, but this is a pack of their Bear Hugs collection. But the colour Honey I bought specifically for this project. It's a really rich, deep egg yolk yellow. I'm doing a partial reroot, so I'm giving the head a coat of acrylic paint in a colour to match the hair. To cut the needle, I'm using a strong pair of pliers and just cutting that at an angle. This is what I always do for reroots. Viscose has a maximum length, much like yarn, so I'm checking how long that's going to be against the doll. I'm drawing in the lines where the partings will be for the fringe and for the ponytail. This is where I'm going to be rooting. I root in the same way as I would with yarn with Viscose. I'm adding new holes. I've never found it necessary to punch a new hole before rerooting. Sometimes I like to trim the end of the fibre so that it won't, like, the tail doesn't poke out. It can look a bit neater. It doesn't always matter. So once I'm done, this is what I've got. And I'm gluing with a thin PVA glue. Don't use a thin PVA glue with Viscose. I'll show you later why this was a mistake. I've never had this issue before, but there was a problem this time. I'm using a skewer to make sure that the glue is touching all of the hair inside the head. So then I'm going to make the pigtails. There's not enough length in the Viscose to be able to do this without doing a cheat. I'm using wires so that these are both posable and will have height. And I am using my glue gun to just add pieces of hair going up that wire. I don't need to go all the way to the top because there'll be some from the reroot to cover the base of the pigtails. This is just to add the length. Sexy Jutsu is supposed to be distractingly beautiful, right? So she has massive boobs, so she's going to get a boob job. So that the epoxy sculpt has something more to grab onto, I'm sanding her chest a little bit. I've been asked to include more of the sculpting process before, so I'm going to leave in quite a bit of it. I always start with a ball of epoxy sculpt and then cut that in half, partly because the hemisphere is a good starting point for a boob shape, but also that means that I'm going to get equal amounts of clay roughly on each side. I start by kind of connecting and blending the piece of clay into the doll's body and trying to make it boob shape. If you're not sure what boob shape looks like for the particular sort of boob that you want, look at reference. When you're sculpting, the boobs will squish together, so every now and again I'm using a blade to move them apart, and whatever I'm doing on one side I'm going to copy over on the other side. I don't really touch the bottom of the boob because it started with a hemisphere, right, and that's kind of boob shape already, so I find it doesn't need much doing to it. I'm refining and smoothing with a wet finger, and I'm using some silicone sculpting tools as well. I'm using a blade to take some clay out where I think it's necessary and getting the shape as close to what I want as I need it to be. We're going to refine it after it's dry as well. I make sure to look from all angles to make sure that her boobs are looking how I want them to. It's very easy to have them look perfect from the front but then completely off from the side, so I make sure you move the doll around to check what she looks like. Once I'm mostly happy with the shape, I'm going to let her dry overnight, then I'm sanding her boobs down, and then I add a coat of spray putty. This is sandable, so once that's dry I'll sand it back again, and if it needs it again I'll respray and sand back again. A while back I asked if you wanted to see how I airbrush blush. First I'm going in on her face with white, this is because of that staining. On her boobs where it's grey I'm going to give her a white base coat. Then I'm kind of doing opposite to how you would with a pastel blush, so I'm starting with a colour quite a bit darker than what I want her final skin tone to be, and I'm shading the bits that I want to be the darkest. So this is where I'm doing like the knees, the ankles, all of the shading around her bust and her shoulders and down her back. Then with a very slightly lighter colour I'm adding kind of where the midtones would be, so like the sides of her calves and down the sides of her thighs. And then with the colour that I want the final skin tone to be, I'm going over most of that, but leaving some of it visible where I want the very darkest bits to be. Because this colour is sheer, that blushing that I did in the previous layers will still show through. And then finally, with a very, very light shade of that skin tone, I'm highlighting the very highest points of her body. I learned quite a lot from Leona's workshop on YouTube. She's a figurine channel, not dolls. So I don't use the same paints as Leona, but her channel has incredible tips. Learned a lot about masking from her as well. Loads of anime stuff. So if you like this, then you'll definitely like her channel. I really love how this looked. When I did her face, I just completely covered the camera with my hand. You're welcome. I am not the brightest crayon in the tool sheds. I promise I'll try and do better next time. So then on to the face up. I did this pretty soon after I did Major Kusanagi's face up. I had a lot of fun doing her face up. So I worked in a similar way to how I did when I did her face up. I was looking at stills of Sexy Jutsu to try and figure out her expression. I did one side winking, so I was like holding my hand over her face to check whether the eyebrows made sense with the corresponding eye, if that makes sense. I always feel really weird about dolls with closed eyes. Like I have this weird thing with like all toys, and I've always had it, and it's weirder as a grown-ass human. Like I think with kids it's kind of understandable, but at my age you'd think it would have stopped. But like I feel like if you draw a doll with her eyes closed, she can never open them. And like I have this Toy Story thing in my brain that toys come to life. I know it's kind of weird or very weird. Anyway, I don't look at I don't touch teddies or anything in toy shops because I can't then put them down because I feel so guilty that I'm leaving them there and they thought that they were gonna get. Yeah, look, it's bizarre. At this point with the blushing, I did it in the normal way that I always do blushing, and it looked awful. I couldn't get it to blend, I couldn't get it to come off, so I decided to just wash her face, which didn't take all of the blush off. So I'm kind of colour correcting here, and then I realised that I didn't want to do as much blushing. The first face up is still kind of visible, so for the second face up I'm just going in and doing exactly the same as the first face up basically. I didn't take this off with acetone because if I used acetone it would take all of the airbrushing off, and I don't want to have to airbrush again. I don't particularly like getting the airbrush out because there's so much cleaning involved with it, so if I can avoid it I'm going to. So when I'd done that first layer, and I wasn't happy with it, that was like the point of, do I keep going with it and hope, or do I wash it off? And I washed it off. I'm trying to kind of give her a smile. Draculaura has like a little bit of a soft smile even in the old face mold, so she's kind of easy to make look into a soft smile, and I'm doing that by shading her corner of her lips and adding a little bit of a line there. I'm adding Pearl X powder on every single layer because she's magical, right? And I want her to be shimmery and beautiful and magical. Naruto obviously has just a black line for his eyebrows, but I wanted the eyebrows to match his hair but then still look cartoonish, so what I did was draw them in the yellow and then very faintly outline them in a brown. To get the eyes really bright, I'm using a white pencil so that what I put down on top will be lighter. I'm trying not to overdo the blushing, but I still enjoy blush on my dolls, so I'm kind of doing it within my own anime style that I'm kind of still developing. I feel like I have like at least 3 distinct different kind of doll styles, and I feel like I'm supposed to have just one. This is a thing for me with all art that I do, like I don't have a single style that I work with, and like I don't think I want to. Like I draw in the way that I'm feeling at the time, which I don't know, it's weird. It feels like I'm supposed to be narrowing it down and have a style, but yeah, I don't think I have one. I'm going to be moving again very soon. Like this will be the 5th place that I've lived since starting this channel, which is a bit much really. No more thanks, but once I've moved I'm going to start taking some good photos of my dolls and then I'll be selling them, so if you want to check out any of the sales for my dolls, make sure you follow my Instagram for information. Back to the repaint. I tend to do most of the repaint in pencil. It's just my preferred medium. I find it easier to work with, but there's not as good colour payoff for certain colours, so I used a bit of white gouache in the scleras to make those really bright. Normally I don't want a super bright sclera, but this is anime, so I do want its pop. And then I'm using black gouache on the lashes. Again, it's not something I do usually in my normal repaints. I prefer a softer look, but this one I do want to be crisp. And more Pearl X powders. I've been using interference gold, a pearl and macro pearl and rose gold in this repaint, so there's lots of different dimension there. So final part, I'm just putting in the Naruto whiskers with pencil. Tenuous link to Valentine's Day. Do you have any plans this year? I didn't make a Valentine's doll last year. This is vaguely Valentine's-ish. I'm doing nothing except moving. So very romantic. And that's the face up done. The glue seeped through the holes in the head. I've never had this before. This is a first. I guess it's because of the viscose. I don't know. So with viscose, be careful. We're going to fix this by cutting out the fibres that have been affected. And then I'm using exactly the same fibres to reroot. If there's not enough there, then I'm going in and adding some new fibres. So not the end of the world. You can also do this if you've melted part of your doll's hair, or if you want to change out some streaks in the doll's hair. This is a really easy way to do a partial reroot. The glue in there is still wet, so I'm just like wiggling that skewer around to try and cover the ends of the fibres that I've just put in. If the glue wasn't wet, you could just add a little bit more and try and target it to where you've added the hair. To add the ponytail, I'm making a hole with my awl. and then I'm inserting that wire. Then I'm using my glue gun to glue around that wire. Then I'm taking that rooted hair and tying that around the wire. So this is going to cover up the wire and be part of the body of the pigtail. I'm using super thin wire to tie this up. I find super thin wire the best way of securing doll's hair. To style her fringe, I'm using a razor to roughly cut it first, and then I'm going in with my tiny embroidery scissors to refine it. I'm brushing some water through her fringe with a spoolie, and then I'm using this scrap of fabric and then pinning it at the back of her head so that it can stay flat while it dries. So Sexy Jutsu is naked, but that's not going to fly on ye olde YouTube, so I'm going to make her like a cloud bikini. Lex of Stick to It Creations was felting a witch's hat, I think, and I thought that was the perfect technique to make these clouds because I can make them really wispy. So I watched a couple of videos on YouTube and I've decided I'm going to make the base of the bikini wire. You know I like to make removable clothes for my dolls, so this is going to mean that I can take the clothes off if I want to. I never take the clothes off, I just need them to be removable. I don't know, I can't explain any of this. So I'm just checking on the doll where I want these loops to be, and it's going to be like a kind of halter top sort of job. And to make it especially easy to see, I decided to do white on white on white. A nice one, Lee. What a good idea. You need to put something behind your work that won't get felted into your work, but can take like the depth of the needle. So this is just some plastic packaging, not polystyrene. I would absolutely throw up, no flipping chance. And then you just stab, 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 stab. Same deal for some fuzzy cloud underpants. That's all the components done. For a simple doll, well, there were a lot of steps there, huh? I put some mica powder on her boobs and her butt to make her look especially shimmery and shiny. To put her head back on, I'm first putting it in this plastic bag and then into hot water to soften the vinyl. I've had too many issues with hair using a hairdryer. I'm going to make a crystally heart that she can hold, because in a lot of the anime it looks like she's blowing a kiss and there's a drawn heart. So I have this Swarovski crystal and I'm using some super thin red wire and just twisting this through and round, and then I'm going to wrap it to her finger. This was before I started cutting down neck pegs. Genuinely, just watching this gives me anxiety for the paint job. I'm threading the wire through the loops I made and then cutting it with a little bit of length so that it's not super fiddly if I decide to take the clothes off. So what do you think? Were you a Naruto fan back in the day? What do you think about Sexy Jutsu? I think it's goofy, potentially problematic, but I don't know, discuss in the comments. Thanks for taking the time out of the day to hang out with me. I enjoyed it, I hope you did. Thanks as always to my wonderful patrons, with a special shout out to Camilla. You're all awesome. Thank you for helping me continue doing what I'm doing, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks again. Bye.